Come on, Ruby. That's not going to screw it up. Happy Sunday. Welcome. I'm going to try to get out of the sun so I can see the comments. Yesterday was 100% rain. We couldn't even walk outdoors, and today it's beautiful and bright sunlight. How nice is that? Good afternoon. Happy Sunday to everybody. Hopefully we'll get some people in here. Welcome. Hey, I don't know if you saw, I was on someone else's live recently. It was so painful to be on their lives. The way people run their lives is really atrocious. Just let everybody comment on top of each other, screaming. It's like Jerry Springer. Can't hear a damn word anybody's saying. It's really frustrating. Hey, folks, do me a favor. I know it's probably a day where most people are out and about, but if you don't mind, if you could just share this out, it would probably help bring in a few more viewers. The way you do that, if you don't know, is you hold the screen down for a half a second, and then you invite your mutual friends. It's pretty simple to do. It's free. Hi, folks. So I'm going to do the same thing while we're talking here. Just give me a second to do that, and then we'll get into it. I'm going to talk about Jared Kushner a little bit, about some of the other things that are burning a hole in my head. The more that I hear, I mean, I'm not shocked by it, but I'm disgusted by some of the things. It's just more of the same stuff. And it just never seems to end. I wonder, is there ever going to be a light at the end of the tunnel for Palestinians? They just seem to always get the worst end of the deal. And no matter what they do, they can't win either way. If they're peaceful and they remain quiet, they endure more subjugation and oppression. And if they take any actions to push back, they're condemned as terrorists and violent people. How can you win in that situation? You can't win in that situation. Just a sec. For those of you who popped up, I don't know why that is, but when you invite somebody to a live, it automatically brings them up as a guest. I wasn't trying to do that. Sorry about that. I'm gonna bring up guests in a bit, I promise. But that's the frustrating part of watching this for so long, is that it's just always been the same thing. It's always been Israel claiming to be this victim surrounded by Arab countries. And all they do is brutalize the people next door and then go, oh my gosh, how dare these people fight back? Why are they attacking us poor Israelis? I've been speaking lately with somebody, I think she was on the live yesterday for a while, Daniela. Not Daniela Omar, not that horrific lady who's terrible. But this is another, I think her last name is Bloom. And she calls me naive. She says that I'm naive. I don't understand what it's like to be an Israeli. And I understand what it's like. I mean, I've never lived there. I've never been through the experience, but I've heard people speak of it enough to know what they're experiencing. Not the emotions of it, but of course the description of what they endure. And I wouldn't want to be living under rocket fire. I understand that. And not all the civilians in Israel support the most hard-right government in their history. I get that too. But to look at this from one side only and complain about the fact that all you have to deal with, I mean, yes, everyone has to deal with stuff. The Palestinians have to endure not just rocket fire where they have to duck into a shelter. They have to endure snipers. I'm not talking about 10-7. I'm talking about before. Bulldozers. Rachel Corrie, American activist who went into Gaza to try to stop the Israelis from bulldozing someone's home, as they like to do on the regular. She was run over by a bulldozer purposely. So to say that you're upset because you're frightened or there's increasing levels of anti-Semitism, yeah, I sympathize with that. But it's a little more harsh to have a 12,000-pound bomb dropped on your neighborhood and have your friends and relatives blown apart, body parts scattered around the building and it crumbles, than it is to feel uncomfortable as you walk to your local bagel shop or wherever you're going. I don't mean that. I shouldn't have said that. That's not the fair thing to say. But when you go out in town and you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe how uncomfortable I feel. Yeah, get over it. You feel uncomfortable, a child has their body blown to bits, or children are starving in hospitals, or people are having their hands tied behind their back and run over by a tank. And you're bitching about how you might feel uncomfortable. Give me a break. And I understand there's a historical part to this because people see it as part of a longer standing set of injustices or racism or anti-Semitism. Yeah, that's bad. And it's unfortunate. It's horrible that people get mistreated and blamed as a smaller group for other societal problems. I agree with that. But it doesn't change the fact that that does not overcome the violence that Israel is putting out towards Palestinians. It's just not okay. It's just not okay. And to somehow try to justify that crap, by saying, well, gosh, we've been injured in the past, so therefore we have the right to do what we have to do to protect ourselves. Yeah, you have the right to do basic security, but basic security does not involve driving down the street in occupied East Jerusalem and spraying, rancid shit water on people's homes. What does that have to do with security? What does security have to do with when you have peaceful protesters, 12, 13 years old, waving a Palestinian flag during a right of return march in the West Bank, shooting them in the head, shooting them in the knee, breaking their arms, whatever the case may be? If you outline the litany of things that Israel does to Palestinians, very few of them have anything to do with actual security, and they have everything to do with terrorizing another people. Why? Because they can. I keep coming back to that. They do these things because they can. And that's the problem. And the problem really comes back to one thing. It comes back to a mindset. And that has to do with a lot of other problems too. It's not just in Israel. But the mindset of those who allow these things to occur, who justify these things or try to, is a mindset of callous indifference to the suffering of others. They just don't care. Now, there may be some members of the H group who feel the same way towards Israelis or towards the military or towards the entire state of Israel. Granted, that's fair to point out. But the problem is that most Israelis, and this comes back to guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, publicly say on TV, talking to somebody who's an Arab, hey, my security and my family's security is more important than your right to walk down a street. That's what the guy said. So here's the problem. The Israelis claim to be victims while they are being victimizers. And yes, at times they have been victimized. So in fairness, it's not unfair for somebody to point out, like Daniela has done, that they feel they're victimized in terms of the people living in the border where this happened. I can understand that feeling. I think that the challenge that people like me have in trying to look at it as objectively as a human can, in light of what other circumstances. And the common language I keep hearing is that people who rise up do it out of hatred, that they just want to unalive as many Jewish people as possible. They're brought up to hate Jewish people, all that blah, blah, blah. And I try to bring up the point of why does any group of people rise up? There was something called the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. What were they rising up against? An oppressive, awful situation where another group with power was doing something horrific to another, had less power. So the same dynamic, not the same circumstances, but the same dynamic has been in place and continues to be in place between Israel and the Palestinian people, who all they want, and they don't want to harm Jewish people, they would ideally like to reestablish the borders that were in place in 1947, because life was much better for everyone at that point, for the most part. And it's unfair when these dynamics change through the British and the Balfour Declaration and funded by these particular families. I won't mention the names, you know who they are. And the fact that somebody else has gotten the short end of the stick forever. Now, it's happened historically, fair enough. It's happened in my country, and that doesn't make it right for it to happen elsewhere. And we're watching this happen in real time. I can't go back to 1810 and talk to the current leadership and say, hey, stop it. It's done. And I also agree that what was done in 1948 is, in a way, done. And I can see the argument that because it's done in that fashion, that it would be fair for some sort of resolution to include that part that has been done. It's not fair, but it's probably practical. But to maintain settlements in the West Bank that have just been growing at record rates under these whack job leaderships across all the different prime ministerships, that's why we're in the problem we're in. If Israel would have granted the territory in the occupied territory as part of a two-state solution, and they always blame the Arab people, saying that they won't agree to anything. No, they've offered terrible deals. I talked to somebody yesterday. I said, hey, if I invited you over for lunch, and I said, hey, let's eat together, and I made myself a really nice sandwich, let's say pastrami on rye or whatever the hell it is, and it really looked good. And so the person's like, great, I'm going to have pastrami on rye. So I offer them, I go to the cat box in my little room where the cat box is, and I scoop out some cat turds, I throw it on a sandwich, I put some lettuce on it, and I say, here's your sandwich. And they go, no thanks, I don't think I want to eat that. I want the pastrami. Well, I'm offering you a sandwich. What do you mean? Don't you like to eat? Don't you like food? What's wrong with you? Why do you reject my meal? I'm trying to be polite to you. If you do that, you're never going to get anybody to say yes, because you yourself wouldn't agree to a cat shit sandwich. So to say those 5 deals that were generous deals, yeah, you might have put a generous helping of cat shit on the sandwich, good for you, but if you wouldn't accept a circumstance like that, why would you expect somebody else? And if you're the kind of person that wants to control everything in perpetuity because your interests become first and foremost, that's why there's not peace, because you have to give a little to get a little. And if the Israelis aren't willing to give a little, as they never have been in the history of this conflict, they're not going to get much in return other than what they've been getting. To expect otherwise is to expect a people to passively accept being brutalized by a military that claims it's the most moral army in the world, but it is probably one of the least moral armies that's ever existed, especially because of how they lie. We have videos posted here on TikTok of soldiers gleefully blowing up mosques, bragging about blowing up residential buildings, firing unannounced rockets and missiles and bombs on municipalities and places where it's the most densely populated place on earth, and unaliving hundreds or thousands of civilians in the clip of 1 week. This is what an army has been doing, and they try to say it's reasonable and justified because of what happened on 10/7. Well, what happened on 10/7 was bad. The number of civilians unalive were probably in the neighborhood of 800 to 900, possibly. I don't know the exact number. Some of whom were hurt during the festival by the Israeli response. But let's just say 500, for pick a number, were unalived directly by the H group, with gunfire, with homes being lit on fire, with, whatever it may have been. Not the things that have been alleged, like the women being affected and the babies and all this bullshit that has no documentation for. I'm still waiting for some evidence, something, anything to corroborate that. And I keep being told I'm an awful person because I keep saying that's what I'm looking for. And this person, Daniela Bloom, says she's going to link me up with this 47-minute film that was shown to select journalists. I don't want to see it to watch the horrible stuff. I want to see it if it does indeed corroborate some of the more egregious claims, because I think that's fair to do. I would like to be able to say that what we're being told is truthful because of the evidence provided. That's fair. But I can't deny it, as I often say. People say you're denying. I'm not denying it because I don't know for sure. But I can't confirm it because I don't know for sure, right? I think it's a fair thing to say. And the pattern we get back to is Israel lies. They constantly lie. They have paid people to go out and lie to the public on the regular. They spend a lot of money on it. So here are people like you and I trying to make heads and tails of something, just trying to be objective as best we can. But given the history of how this particular government functions and their military representatives, it's hard to take them at face value. It's like that boy who cried wolf. We've talked about this. So that's how I see it. Now, recently, we've had people like Jared Kushner. If you don't know who Jared Kushner is, he's the son-in-law of Donald Trump, married to Ivanka Trump, Trump's daughter. And they're like a match made in heaven, those two, I'll tell you that. They kind of deserve each other. So let me give you Jared Kushner's background, just to get, most people probably don't know this, but his family has a massive real estate conglomerate. And they own huge portions of residential and commercial buildings, mostly residential. In my state where I live, there have been media reports of people being horribly mistreated, their lease being violated, kicked out early. They're for dubious reasons, like you're making too much noise or some shit like that, just to control who gets to stay in their properties. In addition, when something's broken, like a water heater breaks, or the kitchen gets stopped up, or whatever it may be, they don't come and fix it. They just ignore it. They make as much money as possible being slumlords. That's reported on the local news. It's not me saying it. Now, I have no reason to trash Jared Kushner, but he appears to be another scumbag, and there's plenty of them in my city. I'm aware of them because, unfortunately, and listen, it all comes back to the same theme. If you don't know, and this is just as an aside, this is just the truth, Jared Kushner happens to be Jewish. And where I live, there's a large percentage of the local population, which is a very nice community of people, from which there are a number of landlords who behave in the same fashion. I was a landlord for almost 20 years in the city in which I live. And, trying to be a decent human being, you try to give people a chance. If they're behind a little bit, you work with them. If something breaks, you fix it. Blah, blah, just being a landlord and doing the best you can to be a decent human being. Well, these people don't think that way. They think, what's the bottom line? How can we make more money? Who can we screw to get more money? Why should we fix something? These people have no power. Take us to court. They don't have the money to take these people to court. They can't even get away from their job. They're working 3 jobs just to barely survive and pay your damn rent. And then when it comes time to do your part of the deal, you don't do anything. You just leave them out to dry. This is the kind of person he is if you want to know his background, okay? Now, I don't know his entire life story, but I do know that is happening still and has been happening for a long time. So that's just one element of his quote-unquote character in play. So let's fast forward. He did a $2 billion deal with the Saudis for his benefit because he's using his political contacts for financial gain. Now, recently, he was interviewed about what's been happening right now in Gaza. And most of us have probably seen this, but if you haven't, the videos are floating around. I'm making a video on it right now. I'll be putting it out this afternoon. What this guy basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase, somebody asked him what should be done in Gaza, what should happen next. He says that terrorism shouldn't be rewarded with a 2-state solution, so no chance for a peaceful settlement, first and foremost. He said that the Israeli government should remove them, the people of Gaza, to somewhere, anywhere other than Gaza. Because what's there really to return to? That's what he said. There's not much to return to. And then he said, by the way, the money that's been diverted from the people, which could have helped innovation and other economic benefits, have been siphoned off to either the H group or the leadership. That's a reasonable assessment to make. I think that's not counterfactual. But he said that it could have otherwise benefited the people. I don't believe that for a second. Because the moment the Palestinian people start to make any advances on any level, what happens? Mowing the lawn. The Israelis come in with some dumb excuse based on rockets and blast the shit out of something, right? And say it's all about catching the bad guys, and they kill like 1,500 civilians. And they destroy a bunch of shit. And again, why do they do it? Because they can. This is what Israel does. They do what they do because they can. And who backs them up? My country. Why does my country back them up? I was doing a video about this today. It's going to come out. It's probably going to get me taken down. It might get me banned. But we got to start talking about this stuff. Candace Owens has talked about it recently, and she got kicked off the Daily Wire. But to finish the Jared Kushner story, he was talking about the benefits of waterfront property and how nicely it could be to develop that. So this guy, this is how he thinks, and he said it with the most casual nature. He didn't say it with any kind of contrition or sympathy. And this guy, I believe, is a complete sociopath. I talk about the sociopathic serial accumulator class. He is the poster boy for that group of folks, where they put the making of money and benefiting themselves above everything. And it's a very, very common characteristic that I've noticed among people that support Israel and who support Zionism. Of course, not everybody, but I've seen enough of it that there's a pattern. And it's not a trope going back to the historical, things against Jewish people. It's just a behavior pattern that is indicative of a belief system that is callously indifferent to the suffering of others, that's self-serving, selfish, cruel, and barbaric, and willing to do anything and everything to their benefit at whoever's expense. It doesn't matter. I've been seeing that over and over and over and over again. And it's been happening in our country for a long time too. If you look at the way things have been evolving in America and who sits in the positions of power and who benefits from the policies and the influences that are occurring, you can very quickly put together a puzzle that's not that hard to put together. And if you can't see those things, if you're somebody who denies that, and listen, I talk about this all the time. I was thinking about this today. If the Mexican cartels or some affiliates of theirs came into the United States and had a deliberate plan to try to make something to their gain for the Mexican government and the Mexican people who are among this group that support this effort, they have a movement that wants to protect their people and provide for their interests. Fair enough. But they start to infiltrate the government. They start to get positions of power in different administrations. They use the legal systems of lobbying, bribery, the revolving door to their benefit, insider trading within Congress. Then they take positions of power within industry, and they control things to an extent where if you don't behave nicely towards their efforts and their goals, you are ostracized as an anti-Mexican bigot. Why do you hate Mexicans? Why don't you support Mexico? We're the good guys. How dare you speak out against us? We're dealing with all these rabid American Southwesterners that are attacking us for, whatever reason. How dare you? So if you replace the word Mexican, in this case, with another group, that's a much smaller version of the population, why is it now completely verboten or forbidden to even discuss it? And it's considered to be racist or anti-Semitic just to even get into the conversation, much less dig deeper into it and delineate what's what. And again, you don't have to do it in a way that's mean-spirited, but it should, just by the very idea of looking at it and doing some basic analysis, which is what Candace Owens was doing. She didn't bring any of this stuff on her own. She didn't do like her own homework and say, I believe this. She pointed to others that had said stuff and just talked about it. And that brings up the question of, why are people trying to control the dialogue? Is it because there's validity to it, or is it because they really believe that it's just a bunch of nonsense and it's racist? I don't know. But I can tell you this, enough people have talked about it. I don't think they're mean-spirited. There are some that use it as a way to kind of, veil their racism or their hatred towards a group. But I don't feel any of that myself. And yet I'm a free speech advocate who believes that we should be able to discuss any issue, especially one that has a huge impact on the policies that the country that I live in enact. And we're supporting right now a complete and utter genocide where the money and the munitions and the military cover and the political cover at the UN provide a smooth pathway for this country to continue to mete out damage and destruction at a level that's incomprehensible. and disproportionate with what they endured on the time of the attacks of 10/7. And therein lies the problem. If somebody hits you in the face, and you come back at them and you clip off their ears and you go after their cousin and you unalive them and you chop off the mother and father's legs and then you go down the neighborhood and you blow up all the houses, is that a proportionate response to somebody smashing you in the face? No, not at all. That's absurd. And yet that's the justification, that because they know them, they're all guilty. Well, you know this family member and he hit me, so therefore it's your fault. No, it's not. I didn't support my brother hitting you in the face, you dumbass. Why did my 3-year-old son have anything to do with my 22-year-old kid punching you? What the hell? But somehow you can justify that, and then you grab people up and stick them in jail because they know somebody in the family and they're down at the church one day and they just happen to be there and they're talking to the pastor, so you grab the pastor and all the kids that are at church and you stick them in jail and say, you know this family who this one person did this, so you're going to pay. That's bullshit, and that's not justifiable. That's why when